What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about mulching garlic. That's right, we're going to talk about mulching garlic. As you can see, we do have some snow on the ground. That means winter has arrived. And despite the fact that it's still technically fall, the fact that we got snow means that it's technically can be fall, but it's actually winter. And so because it's actually winter, we need to get our garlic put to bed for winter. This is the last thing that we do in the garden, and there's a few other kind of odds and ends that can be taken care of later, but this is the most kind of last time sensitive thing that you want to do to get ready for the long winter's nap. And so if you're somewhere where you don't have a long winter, you could probably forget about this step. But for those of you that live in zones 3 through about, I'd say maybe even 6, possibly 3 through 6, definitely 3 through 5. We're technically zone 6 here, but it really depends on the winter. Some winters we have weather that's like zone 6. Other times we have weather that's more like zone 5. And that's because we have a lot of lake effect from Lake Huron. And so depending on which way the wind predominantly comes from that year, depending on just like the wind cycles, we might have a warmer year, we might have a cooler year, and we're right in kind of that fringe. And so even though we're in zone 6, I still will mulch my garlic. I know that a lot of people will say, Luke, I've never mulched my garlic and it's been fine. Well, like I said, sometimes if your weather is warm enough, if you're not reaching 5-10 degrees Fahrenheit or lower, and you're up there and it's still like 20 or 30 degrees, you might be fine. Garlic is very hardy and it does tolerate those temperatures without a whole lot of protection. But below that threshold, that's where you start to see a lot of die-off. And that's been one of the biggest mistakes that we've personally made with some of our less hardier varieties, is that it doesn't always get down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, it might happen only 1 or 2 days out of the entire year. For the most part, because of where we're at in Lake Huron, it usually stays around 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit for the lowest temperature that we get. But there are years that we get lower, and we've lost so much garlic in the past that about 2 years ago I said, you know what, for the cost of mulch, for the time that it takes to mulch your plants, let's just start mulching. And so I've really made it kind of a mainstay thing that I do on the channel, is I talk about mulching because it's very important and it really doesn't take that much time. So we're gonna get doing that. The next thing I want to answer is, so the first question we get all the time is like, Luke, should I mulch? And the answer is absolutely yes, especially like I said, in that zone 3 to zone 6, I would definitely mulch. 3, 4, 5, and 6 zones, please mulch. It's really important that you do it. The next thing is that, so should you mulch? Yes. The next thing people ask is, what should I mulch with? There's a few mulches that I've kind of experimented throughout the years with, and I've had great success with all of them. But there are a few that I like more than others, and I'll go through those. The first one I tried is grass clippings. Now in the fall, you're usually doing like one final mow over of your lawn, and that can be great because you're producing a lot of organic matter. There's very few weed seeds in the fall because most of the grass is already, that kind of flowers and goes through its seed cycle in like June or July. So you're well out of the threat of having grass seed in your grass. So it's usually very clean, and it's really good. It's really good for the garden, but it doesn't make a really good mulch. And the reason why is because the grass itself is not actually very dead. It's very green, and a lot of that wet material actually can hold too much moisture, I find, on the soil. Now it's really good for your compost pile. In fact, throw all of it on the compost pile and use all of it that you can because it's fantastic. Also, use it as a mulch on beds that don't have living things in it yet. Like we'll cover our beds up with like grass clippings and mulched up leaves and stuff as a mulch layer, and over time that stuff breaks down and it feeds our soil. And so it's wonderful for that, but I just don't prefer to use it on our plants. So try to keep that off, if at all possible, on your garlic, because that high moisture content is what you don't want near the plants. And that's going to create some mold and rot, and you do run the risk of those things happening when conditions are so damp. The next thing I've tried that I do like to use are things like mulched leaves. Mulched leaves are great. They're very light, they're very airy, they provide a lot of insulation, but there's one downside to that, and that's that they do blow. In the winter months, we get some very strong winds. The song, I think it's called the Edmund Fitzgerald. Yeah, The Fate of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The gales of November. Well, we get gales from November all the way to pretty much like February or March. And what happens often is if I use just leaves, I find that the same thing happens to what happens in your lawn. If you leave leaves out, well, the next strong wind you have, they're in your neighbor's yard, and then they're upset at you. So, or they get all trapped in the corner there, like where like there's kind of a wind catch. They just get trapped in there, and you really don't have a whole lot of benefit. It works if you don't have strong winds, or if you can kind of like lay it down with something to kind of settle it, it's fine. But I find it just ends up blowing around, and then by January you've lost your mulch layer, and you're going to, you're trying to find something else to do the job. So it works, just not really in our area. The next thing that I use that I absolutely have loved is finished compost. Now, finished compost is great, but it's not ideal for something like a garlic. And the reason why is because we don't want to, what we want to do is in the spring, we want to be able to take that mulch layer off. We want to be able to take it off because too much soil or too much compost becomes soil, and you don't want to bury your garlic too deep, because then the pressure actually kind of constricts the garlic and you have smaller bulbs. So finished or semi-finished compost is fantastic as a mulch, and we talk about it all the time, how great it is. And that's actually what we use, I think, predominantly in most of our beds, is kind of a semi-finished compost, because then in the spring I don't have to top off my beds. I just plant right in it because it's finished by then. So that's awesome, and if I have it, I'll use that. But the thing that I love using the most, that I've done a video on already, but I just had to talk about it today, is animal bedding. Animal bedding. I love animal bedding. Particularly, it's the cedar chip animal bedding. They use it in like rabbit cages, and people use it in like chicken houses where they like roost in like a nesting box. They'll use it for that. I absolutely love it because the chips are very light, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The chips are very light. They hold on to that air. They don't hold on to too much moisture. They don't break down very fast, so they do really kind of settle, but they're heavier than leaves, so they really stay where they're placed. And in the springtime, all we have to do is just take our hand and kind of rake it up with our hands. It comes up very easily. It does not cause too much trouble, and it's awesome. It also does not suppress too much. I've seen a lot of times where people put something very heavy like leaves, and if it gets too matted down and the leaves are too whole and raw and they're not mulched up enough, they can kind of have a matting effect, and they can mat down, and they can actually kill off and suppress some of the garlic, which I've seen in the past too. So another reason why I don't really love using leaves. But yeah, so I really love using animal bedding. The final method of mulch that I've used in the past that I don't mind, but I don't prefer either, is straw. Now, straw it's just, for me, it's not really something I like. I prefer to keep it out of the garden unless, of course, I'm using it in the cores. When I core garden and I dig my trenches to put my cores in, that's the only time I use straw in the garden. And that's because it gets fully broken down, it gets fully digested by the insects in the soil, and you don't have an issue. If I'm using straw, it's just, I find I have way too many weed seeds that spread around if I'm putting it on the surface. So it's good, and the garlic can go right up through it. It insulates wonderfully. It's got a lot of surface area. It's fantastic. It's not fantastic if you don't want to do a lot of weeding later, because I do find you get a lot of weed seeds later. A lot of grass and stuff kind of will pop up. So I don't prefer it. This is the stuff. It's right here. It's called Easy Clean Bedding and Litter. It's pine. It's great. I think I might have said cedar before, but I meant pine, and it's very, very lightweight. So let's go check it out, get it on the bed. So I want to talk about this really quick before we get it put on the beds. Like I said, this is called Easy Clean. It's just bedding and litter, pine shavings. And I really love this because of just how light it is. Now, it's not light like leaves are. Leaves are light and they'll blow around. These really don't blow because they're such a fine shaving that they really don't blow. They actually kind of just nest. And I really, really love that. Now the next question that gets asked quite frequently is, Luke, how much do you put on? What is too much? And I usually say about 1 inch to 1.5 inches is really all you need. You don't need a super thick layer of this stuff because it is very it's very fluffy, so it holds on to heat very well. And there we go. There's a full bag. And then I'll just take my hands and I'll kind of just rake it around. Alrighty, just about done. So I know the last question that you guys are going to ask is, Luke, are you worried that the pine mulch is going to over-acidify the soil? And the answer is no, I'm not concerned about that one bit. Pine needles and pine mulch have not been found to actually acidify soil. Yes, pine trees do grow in acidic soil, and yes, pine needles are acidic. And those things can both be true, but so can the fact that if you take pine needles and add it to, regular pH balanced soil, that it does not affect the pH. And that is also true. All three things are true. And that's just because pine needles break down at such a slow rate and pine mulch breaks down at such a slow rate that the acidity actually leaves the material before it has a chance to affect the soil pH. And so that's why there's really no effect to the soil, and that's why I'm not worried using it in the garden. It's just a very common misconception that you can acidify soil with the addition of pine. So not worried at all. This is gonna be great, and I cannot wait. This is just awesome, awesome stuff. So, all right. There you go. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. I really hope that you give this a shot. Let me know in the comments box below if you have tried this. And also, if you have a chicken coop or a rabbit hutch, I think is what it's called, and you're raising rabbits, this stuff would be awesome to add to your garden because it's going to also have the rabbit manure and the chicken manure added right in. And that's going to be an awesome thing to add to your garden because then it'll kind of age and weather, break down, feed your plants as well as insulate. So that's a total win-win in my opinion. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow big or go home. And we'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.